All right, sit back, relax. It's time for another Laneway Talks.
Good morning, Billy, and welcome to Laneway Talks, and it's good to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and good morning, Vincent. Thank you for having me on your cast.
Oh, that's a pleasure. We're trying to get across to all our Laneway artists, and it's going to take us quite a few years. Look, we start every time with where you grew up, and was it a musical upbringing and whatever. So where did you grow up, Billy?
Well, I was born in Brisbane, but my dad was a mining engineer, so we were up in the Northern Territory for the first part of my life, and then my mother got jack of that, and she moved us down to Sydney and into Elizabeth Bay, and a little apartment there. My dad used to have to come and go. She got sick of crocodiles and buffaloes and everything.
Well, Elizabeth Bay you couldn't go any worse than that. Lovely place where Jeff Duff lives.
Yeah, well, that plonked us as young kids in the middle of Sydney, in the middle of life. It was exciting and also pretty rough around there too.
Yes, it was in the early days. I had a lot of friends there. Roger Mason from the Models, and a whole host of people. So, tell me. How did you get started in music? So did you go to school and did you meet up with buddies who were, into music also, or did it come later in life, Billy?
Well, it sort of began, I'm a practicing artist these days, have been for decades now. But initially it started because I was actually at art school and my sister bought me a guitar as a present, an acoustic, and I just fell in love with it. But prior to that, my mother had made me do violin lessons.
So hold on, let's think age brackets, okay, Billy? So if you're talking art school, that means you were at university art school?
Yeah.
Yep, so you really...
As a child, I did learn the violin, but I was pretty bad at it. I couldn't even master, Twinkle Twinkle Star without getting complaints from the neighbourhood.
Couldn't get excited about the violin.
But I did branch out, and I was busking. I used to go busking when I was really young, like 13, 14, in like tunnels at Central and just play crazy violin.
Oh, really?
And just sort of let loose, and that actually was a revelation to me. However, I did go away from that a little and then went to art school, and it was at that point that my sister, as I said, bought me a guitar. So I was probably very late teens, early 20s, and I picked up bass playing and a little bit of keyboard playing in that process, mucking around with different people. So I had a kind of general musical background, but I never classified myself as a musician.
No, so you didn't learn formally. So when you got the guitar, you just started experimenting and teaching yourself. Is that correct?
I did get formal violin training. I used to go every week to a class.
But how did that transition to a 6-string guitar?
Well, simply because the strings have notes on them, and the guitar is just a bigger version that you pick. So I could understand the guitar quite well. So yes, I just taught myself.
So did you have the rhythm in you, in the sense that you had tunes in your mind and, you picked up the 6-string guitar? Okay, there's a kind of a transition from violin to guitar. But, were you getting these tunes in your head where you're going, wow, I need to release, I need to get out
with this stuff? Well, I think so, because my early interest in the guitar was centered around, I really liked surf guitar playing. I thought that was amazing. And particularly I liked the Atlantics because they were really balalaika players who then transformed on Les Pauls and Fenders, sort of interesting music. And
So tell me, so you're starting there with your acoustic. So do you start to write songs, or are you just doing cover songs first, and that's what you're exploring first?
Again, I was terribly undisciplined, so I used to just like to write my own pieces. And that wasn't out of any arrogance or anything. I just preferred it that way.
I mean, if people know who you are now and what you do now, to me it seems very natural. You're very artistic, and therefore it's always been in you, and especially that way that you said that I was a little bit arrogant and I just started writing. But from what I see online with what you're doing now, artistically. It all kind of fits, really, Billy.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. And, I started mixing with other people who thought the same way. And, I went through different groups of musicians as I worked my way up in the playing arena. But I actually started out, my first musical enterprise publicly was not on the guitar, it was on the bass, which I thought was just a big fat violin.
Well, who was that with?
That was, there was a little band called Aeroplane Footsteps, and we were playing around in Darlinghurst, and we had a transgender singer.
Oh, yeah.
And who played keyboard and some other, I can't even remember who else was in it. That seemed to change every week. But there was her and I, or he and I, them and I, started, composing songs and playing them publicly.
Yeah.
And then I moved on. That sort of didn't go very far, but we did play around at clubs in a city. And then I started another group that I thought was fantastic, called Gangland.
Yeah.
Which was a bit of a pun because we weren't like that at all.
Yeah.
And eventually I met Dean Denham, who I formed the Sea Monsters with. But I'd already recorded the very first cassette on my own.
Yeah.
Through a man called Andrew Rock.
Now hold on. This first cassette, Billy, because the first one we've got up is Black Rum, right? But the first cassette was what?
It's called Way Out West.
Right, but was that the Sea Monsters? It wasn't the Sea Monsters, was it?
It was called the Sea Monsters when we released it, but I'd already recorded that year, and it was pretty much just done on a Tascam 4, the little Tascam 4-track thing.
Yeah.
And they were, and a Casio.
Oh, I hate those
So it's
things.
Casio music, but it's very peculiar. And we printed 500 of them and gave them away to people.
Yeah.
To get things going. And that really created, and that you can find online. You can hear it on some places on net. And I don't have a copy of it myself. Yeah. I'm desperately trying to find one.
Well, you're with a lot of many other artists who go, I don't have those early recordings. But, so therefore, there's an establishment of the Sea Monsters. Now, the Sea Monsters...
So it starts with me in doing this stuff, and then that led to a friendship with Dean Denham, who then we started to meet and write together, and he could play guitar, bass and piano really well. Mm-hmm. And so for the first time I had an actual writing collaborator who I worked with really well. And that leads to a proper band. Yeah. And we had Paul Hester had let
Deck Chairs
Overboard, who we'd gotten to know, and that led to the first
Black Rum
live recordings, and Black Rum, and various other pieces.
So where would
suddenly we were up in a different league. Yeah,
well, tell me, when you got to that kind of point, were you pulling a crowd yet?
Surprisingly, we were.
Yeah,
we were very popular in the inner city area, and so for example, we had the headline spot at the Hopeton Hotel on a Saturday night for a long time.
Well, you've got to ask yourself, Billy, how you categorise the Sea Monsters. Okay, so from I
think it's easy and
go on.
Sorry. No, from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, if you look at where it kind of starts in the early to mid 80s, and there was this real independent pop sound that Australia had of its own. It didn't fit overseas at all. That was our sound. And it was really happening more in Sydney than it was in Melbourne. And you fit categorically into that area. And it's so unique. And you were right at the early phase of it. And there isn't a lot of bands, I think, that are around that at that point where we've released around that 83, 84, 85, 86 with that sound that you had. And it is so accessible, really, even till today. So I'm going to give you a bit of a laugh. I've got a few playlists I put on in the office, and Dan, my business partner, was walking past one day and we were having a chat about something. He goes, "That's a good song. Who's that?" I said, "Oh, that's the Sea Monsters." Now, remembering we can't come across we've got so many acts, Billy, that, we just don't know all the songs. And
No.
and he just went. Now that was only probably 2 months ago that he said that, and that to me is a testament to the quality of the music, and I mean creatively, not referring to the audio quality, creatively, that it stands the test of time and it still sounds like a good indie pop with a slight rock in it. Now that's my impression.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honoured that you think that. And I agree. I think, my partner Sarah often plays my records to torture me. And so I do listen to them from time to time.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised at the how much I actually like them. And I think, though, in one sense, I think they were a little bit out of time because there was a lot of experimentation done between the three albums. There was a lot of experimentation done with really good musicians in Sydney. And remember, at the time, Sydney was the mecca. I mean, if you wanted to be somebody or you wanted to get yourself known, you had to be here and you had to be working. And so there was a lot of people here that you could easily approach, and from all different kinds of groups and genres. And that's really what we did.
Well, talk to me about Cooking with George, because that is a really good release. How did that come along? What is it? What was it?
Well, we'd released Black Rum, and the Cooking with George project was really the beginning of what they do now, with they search for artists and they get this album. So it was fantastic. And they basically just said to us, we're going to send you to the big ABC studios and you can record a bunch of tracks and blah, blah, blah. And the group that was there just as we were leaving were the XL Capri.
Oh, I remember XL Capri very well.
Yeah, and so we went in there and did those morning, and we invited Lewis Tillett to join us.
Oh, well, there's a name. I mean, it's a good name and it can be a bad name, but anyway.
Yeah, but he was somebody that we liked. Yeah, that because he didn't require scripting. He was one of those people who could just play, and you either liked what he did or you didn't. Yeah, I personally did, and so we laid down a whole bunch of tracks in that fabulous ABC studio off William Street, huge, with the sound recorder on a second story above. Who was Apple Sprague, and he liked it so much he kept bringing us back in, and we did a whole bunch of the recordings that you can hear.
Oh, really?
Like 7 Cities of Dreaming was done on its own with Lewis Tillett. Yeah. And that night, for example, is a good example of how there was just myself, a drummer who we didn't know, because we couldn't find Paul Hester, and Dean, myself, and Lewis Tillett. And we had one run through where he listened to the song and he said, I've got it. And then he said, record, and we thumbed it out. It's one of my favourite tracks. And it's the story of Australia at the time, and a portrait of the 7 cities.
Does that roll into Winter Sun?
Yeah.
So Winter Sun, some of those tracks were recorded there? Would that be correct? Yep.
Yeah, and some of them ended up on the next album too. Whoa. So, because we had a lot of material. But what I loved about it, and essentially that's what I really loved about the band when I thought we were at our very, very best, is we were taking lead and we were doing fresh music all the time and laying them down in recordings and kind of moving on and continuing to change and evolve.
There's no doubt between the beginning and the end of your recordings, there is definitely a change and experimentation going on, and that's super important. But I want to ask you something. With Winter Sun, there's a song called James Bond on there. Who wrote that song? What's it about?
I wrote it, and because I always loved spies, I thought that was really cool. But it's a strange song. Yeah. It's a kind of novel, put it that way. So some of the songs were really, and I can come back to this issue later, and where I ended up in my art practice and curated later. I was kind of really, somebody said to me one night, your songs are like little paintings.
That's a good analogy. That's a good analogy. I actually...
They said, well, like you get in front of it and use poetry and melodic lines and then trending sound type in your production. And I think that's exactly what we were doing, though we didn't know it. So I think, in a sense, that's what I meant when I said earlier, I think we were a bit out of time, because that today, of course, is clearly understood. understood. Now, remember, in those days, you really had to be like the Sunny Boys to be popular. You had to have grown up together, either be related in family or gone through school together, never changed a single lineup, got Lobby Lloyd to produce you and just do rock and roll.
Now, come on, you're typecasting the music business. Come on, Billy.
But that's really what it was like. I mean, it was, if you didn't...
Well, I've worked with all those people.
I'm a fan, so don't get me, I don't mean it in a negative. I just mean it, there was one way where you really produced your sound and you gave the audience what they wanted, and which was to go wild and have fun and wreck a pub and so on. And but the Sunny Boys were obviously better than that. And then there was all this other world of musicians who were very difficult. And for example, I really liked, there were obscure bands in Sydney, so many of them at that time. You could go out 7 nights a week and see all these incredible artists doing
absolutely
strange things.
I mean, another song I want to ask you about, though, is City of Funk. Now, I love that song. What is it about?
Well,
do you even remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we made a video for that with Tony Oasis, the country singer.
Absolutely.
And again, you get an example where Tony was brought in to sing a funk song.
Yeah.
She was so confused by it, but in the end, she loved it and she got it, And I said, what we need is Tammy Wynette on the top of it, to make it more interesting. And she did that. But City of Funk was really then about, the crisis in politics that hasn't really changed a lot.
And now let's just stop right there. You are 100% on the ball. I mean, nothing has changed, has it? Everything we spoke about back then and everything we spoke about 10 years earlier than that, nothing has changed. I hate politics. We never bring it up on our Facebook page or post because it just brings across crazy people. It is just nothing changes. We're fighting for the same thing we were fighting back then,
Right. And, there was huge crises going on, people starving to death, wars and all that.
Absolutely.
And the song's chorus line is bring me the money, blah, blah, blah. And in a sense, it sounds quite churlish today. But at the time, there wasn't, aside from Midnight Oil and their things, there wasn't a lot of music deeply criticising the media and, things going on in the world, per se.
Billy, we had someone just in the last 48 hours, present a new song for release and whatever, and said, look, he goes, I've called it Woke Off. He said, but I feel it could be a little bit too controversial. I said, not at all. I said, we live in a democracy. I said, if you want to call it Woke Off, call it Woke Off. I mean, you've got to come up against the media. We do have to have both sides at all times contesting each other. It's what it's all about. And I said, no. And I see with a lot of your songs, I mean, I just love some of those titles you've got. I mean, you got to laugh, The Seahorses by the Sea Monsters. I mean, it's great. It's just fantastic. And we go from Winter Sun and we move to And the Fuzz Dice Cult, which is a crazy name for an album. Where did that come from? And the Fuzz Dice Cult. I mean, it's great. Well, I love it when I, see it.
Yeah, by this stage we've grown up. We're playing, we've done touring, we've learned about surviving in the pubs, and how to support a band like the Hoodoo Gurus or anybody else. And we supported just about every big band. And so they were always an object lesson every single time. And so by this stage, we'd learned a lot and toughened up a lot and could play better because you have to learn how to play in public. You have to, and you have to have the ability to remember all of your music, especially when it's new. Because we had to sing, we would always do different sets and different music and bring different musicians in. So that always upped the stress levels on things. But I think we'd also become a rock and roll band by then because of the work we were doing.
Yeah.
We'd sort of leaned into the muscle of the Australian music.
You'd fuzzed up those guitars as opposed to the twanging guitars in a sense, or the more, if you go back to your earlier material, it has that real indie twang or thinness to it, and it
Casio and a surf guitar.
Absolutely.
And an electronic bass line.
Right. So then you moved up when you start to fuzz things up a bit, yeah?
Well, by this stage, we could afford proper Fenders and Gibsons and basses, and we had proper equipment, and we've been playing on stage with electric equipment. And, that changes you when suddenly you're involved in the real world of real sonics on a stage performing. And, and that album captures that period very well. And you got a song. You change.
Well, you got a song there, Amphetamines. And then there's Detroit Girl. I mean, they're a couple of my favourites. And it really does hover around, I presume, quite different topics as to bands or artists that revolve around fairly similar topics. And that's what they're constantly.
It's much more about life on the road, the Buzz Life Cult. And we used to have a little, I had a Lucky Omen, one of those things you put over your rear view mirror, the fuzzy die.
Oh, yeah.
We used to keep that in the car. And we had a man called Rocky Rochester, who's a fabulous guitarist, lead guitarist. I just had a proper lead guitarist there, mate. And he was an epileptic, but we didn't know. He kept that quiet until one day we crashed and we found out that he'd had an episode whilst driving the car. So after that, we kept the Lucky Dice thing, and we moved from colourful lighting on stage to just black and white, no flashing lights and things like that.
Oh, wow.
But it's funny little details, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, what you got to do to continue to perform. I mean, there's just a lot of things. I mean, some people might go, yeah, so what? Well, it makes a big difference, to how you perform,
Yeah, and it's interesting.
Well, how do we move to Lost Days? So we moved to that. Now we're moving towards what, the late 80s, early 90s. Yep. So what's happening by that stage? So how the Sea Monsters have had lineup changes?
Everything went full circle for me. I had sort of played everywhere and recorded a lot and written a mountain of music, as you know, and you don't have all of it online because some of it I just don't want shared. But I kind of went full circle, and I remember distinctly being in a hotel room in Adelaide and just played with the Cosmic Psychos.
Yeah,
believe it or not,
can't believe you. Yeah, I can't see that combination, but anyway, you did.
That's how it used to be through the booking agency, and everybody was on these tours. And one night you'd be a support, the next night you were the main act, depending on what you could do. But I remember that Dean, during that performance, the Cosmic Psychos came up to the front and were heckling up, and it was a packed hall in Adelaide. And we just ignored it, fine, they're having fun. Because I don't take things like that personal. They're just being tribal and whatever. Fine, it's fun.
Yes.
But they caught Dean on a particularly bad night, and he took his, if I remember correctly, he took his guitar off and took a swing at one of them. And there was a bit of a scuffle and this, that, and the other. And afterwards, there was a brawl in the car park and stuff like that. This is the 80s in Australia. Yeah. You still took your life in your hands.
Yeah, childish stuff, but it all happened.
And no one was there to help you. There were no bouncers, no police or anything. You had to sort stuff out. So, but I remember getting back to the hotel and I picked up a lamp to move it from the side table for some reason, and I came to against the other wall. I'd been electrocuted by this lamp.
Oh, wow.
And I shook myself off and I was okay. Today you would have gone to hospital, but in those days I just had a beer and a cigarette and went to bed.
Oh.
But strangely it had an effect on me, and on the way home I just turned to the group and I just said, I don't really want to do this touring stuff anymore with all the strange things, because I never set out to do that as a songwriter. And I'm finding I'm slowly deteriorating into a kind of, I don't know how I felt really, but I just knew I wasn't enjoying that so much anymore. And we'd had a strange problem with our publisher who wouldn't release our publishing contract, because we had signed early on with EBS.
Oh, yes.
And given us a really good publishing contract. But
I'm very anti-publishing, I can tell you that now. I don't see that publishers, I don't know that publishers perform any duties whatsoever. If I ever hear the statement from them that, well, we'll get you some sync and we'll la-di-la-di. It's all it is an administration to collect and charge a fee. Well, you might as well just do it through AMCOS, APRA and leave it at that and have copyright control. I see no value in them whatsoever.
Well, in those days, that's what they used to do. They'd come around and so we got signed up quite early on to the publishing deal. And we, I had never seen myself as a success in any way, and so to be offered a publishing company with CBS, I was so flattered, so we took it.
Yeah.
And I think we got like a $5,000 fee for signing up.
Yes.
Which was quite
a lot of money back then, a lot of money.
And I bought a combi van for the band to run around in.
Yeah.
And about a week into that, Paul Kelly's coloured girls borrowed the van. And it never survived. And so that's where my publishing went. Yeah. It's straight down the drain.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so then we didn't have a record release. And CBS, the A&R director at the time, even though we had Ken West as the big supporters and we had Roger Grierson managing us, and we had an initial release on his little indie label, Green Records, they weren't really suited to releasing a big record and doing all that stuff. So they were more into this other side of things. So we shopped around and everybody wanted to get the publishing off CBS.
Yeah.
So there was a moment there where if we hadn't done that, we probably could have signed a really great record deal with somebody and proceeded down a whole different road. As a consequence, they refused to release our publishing unless it carried a $200K price tag.
Were you were unrecouped, were you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so they because of that, we got very cross and started to say, well, we don't want to work with you anymore. This is ridiculous. And blah, 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 and we want out. And so they then organised a record deal for the Winter Sun album, which is the first album.
Yeah.
And all of the tracks that are there were recordings that should have been actually re-recorded in a proper 24-track studio and everything.
Yeah.
And they put them all together. They put the artwork together and released an LP through an indie label and didn't discuss the artwork with us or what was going to happen. And they released it. And they contacted me and said, congrats, we've released your record. And I said, what record? I'm not kidding. This is how things used to go.
Yeah.
There was so much disrespect to the artist that they wouldn't even tell you what you.
It exists today. Don't you worry. It's out there with the majors. Nothing's changed.
I think I was aware of a certain amount of dealings, but anyway, that album cover led to me refusing to ever speak to them again at CBS Publishing because they got press photos that we'd done for Interview magazine, which was then, a really cool local, fashionista thing. It was great, but it was strange photographs, and they got a photo of me with Tony Alasis and Andrew Ross, who's a jazz musician and was really doing other things, wasn't in the band at all. Neither was Tony, and put that on the cover, and then did all these strange, stupid things with anchors and this terrible lettering. And
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
It looks like a 5-year-old put it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my favourite, for sure.
And I said, I never would have released that record cover like that. And why are these people in the photos, even though they did perform on the record in a few backing things? Anyway, so it was too late. But that was through Powderworks Records.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yep.
And they were great people and all that, so they know at fault. But it's just the way it all went, and that was just phenomenal to me.
I think, as you said there, disrespectful. I don't want you to think that doesn't occur today. It is happening just as badly with the majors today as it did back then. And, you don't even want to know some of the things we have to tackle at the moment with the majors, and that you're just dealing with companies, I'll say this really honestly, corporations which are maintaining the level of living standards for the executives. Now remember, I've been in this environment, so okay, I'm guilty myself, but I'm on the shoes on the other foot now. So I then champion for the independents, and we are maintaining their lifestyles. How a classic, I used to go in, see George at Universal, and my first words to him all the time, every time I go, I can't believe the foyer. It's the Taj Mahal. Who built this? It is so expensive. The amount of money that he said, it's all before my time, right? But, there's always an answer. But, this was the same all round. I mean, the money maintaining the executive structure at these corporations, and it is still happening today. They live off the creative talents of people like you.
Well, yeah. So that was, by the time I'd recorded, you asked me earlier, the Lost Days LP was released through my friend Andy, and we set up our own little record label just so that we could release it. And Waterfront Records issued it, and it went quite well, But there's just total limits to that. You sell 300 or 400 albums and you're number one on the indie things for months. Seriously, I mean, it's not enough. And,
No. Well,
feels good.
Tell me about my favourite track, Vodka and Chocolates.
Yeah, well, again, this is that's a track about words and moods and feelings more than it is about a direct narrative.
Right.
But it's sort of it's a very poetic piece.
Yeah.
So we used to do that with in between social narratives, love songs.
Yeah.
And usually for me they were just like every other young man, all about the torture of sorting that out.
Yeah.
But then we do this other material that had a kind of we'd allow the words to build a certain storyline, and it has a kind of Mexican feel.
Were you a musician that wrote lyrics prior to writing the music, or did you write the music and then the lyrics?
Well, you always hear the same answers, don't you? I think...
I don't know. I was going to hear your answer.
Well, it's either one or the other, right? And but I think, no, these were, particularly that song, was a crafted piece. Yeah. Probably with the whole group sitting around, and we'd have a few words and then build it up and create this storyline that we sort of liked, the way that the words interacted and the music interacted. But nearly always we were talking about the flavour of the musical elements in it. And that song has a strange Wurlitzer thing in it, as do other tracks. But it had a kind of Mexican feel, if you like. And it's a little bit about enjoying excess.
That's interesting. Enjoying excess. Yeah. You could. That's so relevant. And that's so relevant today. Excess. I talk about.
But this. It was also
Yeah, I talk about it all the time.
Ironic.
Now. It's relevant in today's society. Excess. What we have is we have the rich and we have the poor. And we had a big discussion yesterday, Billy, in the office about this new vaping ban that's going to happen. And my opinion is, well, all we're doing is now going to trade on the misery and death of the lower class, because they are the bigger smokers, where the government is taxing the hell out of them. But if you're serious about cutting lung cancer and everything that goes with it, why not just ban cigarettes like you're going to ban vaping then? The hypocrisy of it all.
Well, exactly. And so the use of words in that sense that might sound one way can carry an ironic meaning. And we always worked on that, idea that the words had a layering. And so poetry was always a big part of the all of the Sea Monsters tracks.
I think you're right on it. The lyrics are they're just from the beginning, the recording, say from Black Rum and then to the end, there's such a play on words with your music. There's depth to the lyrics. There really is. Now, whether there was depth intentionally or whether it was just the creative flows that were happening at the time, I think there's depth to the lyrics. And then you have this quite intricate movement of music around it. Anyway, that's the way it comes to me.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm proud of. You know, as an older Australian musician now, when I look back on it all, I mean, we didn't have any hits except some popular pieces, you know, which I'm just absolutely thrilled that anyone listened to them.
Well, it represents music at a specific time in the Australian music landscape, and there is so many different acts that help nurture the bigger acts. And just because there wasn't huge success here does not mean that this isn't super relevant to our development of music in this country, and it has to be acknowledged by being out there. Now, I do have musicians that don't want their music out, and they just don't care, and I go, well, I don't even know why you recorded it for then. Why even bother? But, you know, this is very relevant to points in time and the development and you know, so well, tell me, as we get to the end of Lost Days, and you're obviously splitting up because I don't have any music after that.
There is no band in Lost Days.
Right, that is just you, more so.
It's gone back to me and the musicians that I know, and I recorded the whole album over months at a small studio. Yeah. And we would, you know, just go and enjoy ourselves again. And for me, I landed in my happy place. Yeah. And today you would recognise that as a professional songwriter. They would have that in their own lounge room, you know, as I do now. But at the time, we had to go somewhere else, you know, and it was still analogue. Yeah. But...
so what happened there at the end? So, you know, you've got these songs together. Was that the end of playing live and it's the next stage in your career and you're looking...
No, we toured that around for a while. Yeah. And by this stage, you know, we're considered veterans, you know, of the, you know, we're only 3 albums in and we're veterans of the scene, you know, so I don't know. And so we were doing live versions of it and with a new set of people, and that was fine. But as I said earlier, I'd already kind of grown out of that role. I wasn't that particularly interested in putting yet another rock and roll band onto the Australian circuit. And you didn't really have options then. You either did that or you just didn't do anything. Yeah. And it was very difficult, whereas now there's a plethora of options for songwriters and performers.
Absolutely, there is.
You know, but then you had no choice. You either went full-time, pretty much a rock and roll band with truck, manager, get roadies, the whole thing. And so we did it for a while, and then I just felt that I'd performed the album, you know, and we did, and it was fine. I liked that. And then I stopped, and at this stage I'm having, you know, I'm a young man now, probably late 20s, very early 30s, and I wanted to go back to university because I dropped out of my second year of University of New South Wales degree to take the Sea Monsters proper on the road. Yeah. And so I just, part of me wanted to go back, and I did. And so I then went on and did a new undergraduate degree at Sydney University, and then a
in arts again?
In visual arts, and then a master's degree, and then a PhD in Australian art in theory. Yeah. And that led me into the world of curating shows and doing other things. And all of my band experiences really paid off at that point because I knew how to handle a group of people. Yeah. I knew how to keep them organised, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I went down a very different road. But in between that period, I used to go and play nightclubs on my own doing blues songs that I really liked.
Really?
Like
Blues?
Infirmary.
Really?
Yeah.
Blues?
Yeah. And I'd just take my acoustic guitar and play as best I could. And because we had some celebrity in the inner city of Sydney, I was able to do that. And people would come and go, oh, that was interesting. And so I was taking this poor audience on another difficult road with me, you know, but I was always selfish in that way. I thought my life was my own. I'm not interested in the big construct. I just want to do what's interesting to me, and if other people enjoy it, excellent.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you're curating and what you do now, because I see a bit of it online, right? So
Yeah.
What does that entail? What are you doing? Are you putting art around music or space around space, or what is it?
Yeah. Well, any sort of artist or curator today will tell you they're not really one thing. And they're much more like the person you meet in the beginning of the Sea Monsters.
Yeah.
Where it's a kind of, to organise a curation today, it has to be socially responsible.
Yeah.
You have to have all kinds of media involved, otherwise it's considered boring.
Yeah.
And blah, 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 blah. So it's kind of, you have to be a master of everything. And then still manage to bring stories together. But I when I finished my degree, my PhD, my first job was working for the National Association of the Visual Arts. Because remember, by this stage, I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
And I've got a battery of
as
degrees behind me.
Yeah.
Right. I'm already old.
Yeah.
And so I worked for the National Association for the Visual Arts and managed to get myself fired from that job for being disagreeable.
You're right.
Because I couldn't cope with.
So you're a little bit of an antagonist, are you?
Well, my friend calls me a contrarian.
Oh.
But I know I didn't think they were servicing their clients well. You know, and I told my boss that, and the next minute I'm out.
Yeah.
But anyway, that took me down a different road, and I thought, what do I want to do? So I applied to what was then Arts New South Wales for a funding grant to create spaces for the Emerging Artists Network in Sydney. Now, at that time, this is around 2000, for every single independent art gallery in Sydney run by, competent professional young artists and that and the other, there were 25 in Melbourne. So the ratio was so out, and yet everybody wanted to come here and do stuff.
Yeah.
So I created Mock Project, which was a pretty big success. And then I had a shift and moved to Marrickville, which we'd identified as having the largest number of artists and musicians living as a quadrant of Sydney. And we opened up S&O Project.
Yeah.
And just today, an article appeared in Germany about that project.
Oh, wow.
And its significance
Fantastic.
to Australian art.
Oh, fantastic.
Because it was very, very significant.
Yeah.
And what we did was got the money from the government, and we presented a beautiful space, and the artists who were showing there untypically did not have to do any work. We presented the whole show, showed it for them, even sold work. And so the artists, these young artists, would go away with a professional show under their belt and often proceed really well. So I started applying all of the things that had bothered me about the music industry to the visual art industry. And since then, we've done dozens of projects here and abroad. The most recent one was in Kyiv, where we built a group that called the Kyiv Non-Objective Group.
Wow.
And they went on to become, using exactly the same thing. In fact, we used no money whatsoever.
Did you go over there, Billy?
Yeah, I'd been coming and going from Kyiv for some time.
Wow.
And because my family are Czech, so Eastern Europe's not that unusual to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I find too with some of the things you put up online when I see it. I look at it and I go, what the hell? And it just begs questions. I just look at it and I'm mesmerised because it's so different. You kind of go, what? What is this? And it just begs questions. That's how... what did he put that there for? It begs a question. Why? What? So interesting.
Oh, well, thank you for that. It also gets me in quite a bit of trouble, but, with people. But that's fine. It's Facebook, and Facebook's really boring in a lot of ways, So yes, a few days ago, I put a post up about D-handles, those little pulls that are on covers that people think are from the 70s. But actually, they're a design icon that goes back in time, that's been endlessly copied and replicated and dates back to people like Le Corbusier or, the Bauhaus and all of this sort of thing, and was originally a masterpiece of design that we now think as something you'd find on a terrible old worn-out cupboard from the 70s.
Yeah.
So I'm always surprised by the origins of things, and I get interested in that. And so that's part of the charm of things. And
so will there be any more music from Billy?
Yeah. In this whole process, I've still made music, and I've worked quite a lot. With the program that we set up in Marrickville, for example, we did a pioneering sound art program there. And every exhibition that we did, we invited the sound artists from Australia or abroad to send us a file. And we had a set of headphones that just jacked into the wall. Yeah. The visitors would come in and put the headphones on and they'd listen to this sound piece. And really it was one of the first proper sound art programs in Australia. And today that's normal. You know, it's only, 20 years back it was considered weird. But so I've always maintained that, and I've done some art pieces and various other things. And I still got my original Fender Standard American Strat at home that I bought from a Hock shop in Newtown all those years ago, and other instruments.
Did you have a semi-acoustic body?
I've got a beautiful John Denver Ovation.
Yeah, I thought so.
Which is a fabulous instrument.
Ovation, very nice.
Well, you get the sound of a Martin from it. That was the purpose of it. So it's a design piece, which I particularly like. So, that, as I grew older, I started to become more interested in range.
So there will be some releases from Billy, or never will we have any more releases from Billy?
I'm building up to it. The various people in the band are always asking me to put the group back on the road and go and do some touring.
I can never get excited about that. I'm going to tell you honestly. That's always a hard thing. I mean, I play in 3 different acts myself, but from all around the world, because you can these days, because, there's no borders anymore. But I can't get excited about going back on the road, whereas the creative releases and what can be achieved, from your own bedroom these days is phenomenal. What music I'm getting, and so I get excited from new music from, say, Billy Gruner. Yeah, I've got the old albums, and I love listening to some of those tracks. I really do, and that's all there. Do I want to go and listen to them live? No, I want to see what you're going to actually write next. It's really what gets me excited every day, and I'm so lucky that I'm so excited every day about the job I do, is to wake up and get an email going, I've got a new track for you to listen to, and I'm the first one who's hearing it. And, say from someone like yourself, where the last piece we put out was Lost Days. Well, if I got something there that said, oh, Vince, I've got a new track I want you to listen to, I go, wow, that's exciting.
I do intend to. We're just moving curiously from one property to another. Yeah. And in the new house that we're making, it has a music studio, and I bought a set of conga drums last week.
Oh, really?
And keyboards and synths, and I've got everything for. And I do plan to do a set of recordings. Yeah. Again. It feels right again now, and so that probably will take place.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic! And for everybody listening, Billy loves his cars and his motorbikes. And the cars are the old Zabs. Yeah, I used to have 2 Zabs, and I have a plethora of motorbikes, Ducatis and Aprilias. But I've seen your Triumph. Yeah, the Triumph, correct?
Yeah, I've currently got a later model Triumph because it's less troublesome.
Yeah, oh yes, well those carburetors on those old Triumphs, they used to leak a lot anyway. I'm very, very well familiar with those.
I've had every single Triumph, I think, through to the latest one. Yeah. And every single one of the early ones would take me as far from home as possible and stop. And you kind of just get weary from that. Yeah. And so now I'm just a sort of gentleman rider, and I like to come home again.
Yeah, you need fuel injection on them. They never go wrong. I tell you, they just keep going. But I do have some old classic Ducatis too. Got carbs.
But I don't trust people in cars.
No, it's a hairy thing. But the freedom of being on a motorbike, and I always having the visor up, or if you have a full face, or you have a different type of helmet, it's freedom for me. And it's time to think, and I go out and I see everything and go, life is just fantastic, Billy. I love it. And
Just every time I come home, Vincent, my wife says, "Oh, thank God you're still alive."
oh, really?
So it's, it carries a sort of fun factor, doesn't it?
Yeah. So,
But,
well, so look, I think I think for people listening that, we've gone through where, and as Billy said, as you've said, Billy, that you're considered veterans across 3 albums, but it seems like a lot more. But then when you see what Billy Gruner has done after that in the art world, you've piled so much into your life. It is quite amazing. I mean, you have piled.
Oh, thank you. I'm very honoured you think so.
And that you're still so creative, whether it be with music or whether it be in, whatever you do, you're curating and whatever, or putting spaces together, and it probably shows, I always think it shows who the person is. There's a creativity in there bursting to come, waiting to burst out, and it's there. And
it's caused me a lot of trouble, Vincent, over the years, and a lot of money.
Well,
but it's all worth it.
Yeah,
and
well,
I'd say to any younger person listening,
you go and say it.
Do it.
There you go. And I would say exactly the same. I've had a blessed life in the entertainment industry. I consider myself just so lucky, and that I can get up every day, and I'm 62 now, and still get excited about what I do. Every day is an exciting day, and I hope that
Good on you, Vincent.
That's what you get from your work, and and what you're doing. And so, I'd like to finish off by saying, we all would like to hear some new music from Billy Gruner, and whether it comes out. Well, I suppose your name is the Sea Monsters in a sense, but and to see where you've grown to with everything that's happened in between, and what that music would sound like.
Well, thank you very much. What I'd like to say to listeners is, because the band didn't have a gigantic reach at the time, it's such a great opportunity now for anybody to go in and listen to the albums, and I'd urge you to go and have a listen to them, and let me know what you think. I would always love to engage with people, and I don't even care if they ring me up and say, "Mate, that was such crap," and I'd probably have a big laugh about it too, or I got something out of those lyrics, and how did you meet that person, and blah blah blah. And I think that the real value of those albums is not so much in what I did with them or whatever. It's what you said earlier. It is a very rare cross-section of just about everybody who was anybody of interest in Sydney in that time, which was an apex moment in Australian music by far. And so each track, each album has, half of Sydney on it. And I think that's what's interesting about it. It blows me away in hindsight to think that I went down that road, because, as I said earlier in the talk, it was not normal to do that.
Well, the only anomaly in the whole discussion is you going out and doing some nights playing blues. That's the only anomaly. Okay?
Well, in a way, I mean, it was, who doesn't love the blues?
Wow, yeah. I mean,
So behind all of these things are huge drivers like that. You ask any musician, who do they really like? And they'll, someone will tell you it's Janis Joplin, somebody else will say it's Led Belly. And you listen to the music they play, it's nothing like that. So I don't think it's an anomaly.
If you think of the word... if you think of the word rhythm and blues, it goes across such a wide berth of music, to use the word, I'm tagging that as rhythm and blues. It's a wide tag, and it's developed so many styles of music. There is no doubt about it. But, well, anyway, it's been great talking to you, and we did just get to about an hour too. And we would love to hear some new music from you if you ever decide to put anything out. And it would be great to, just listen to some Sea Monsters of back in the day, and then some new music, and I'd just love to see those differences. It'd be really interesting.
Thank you very much. And if you're going to tag a piece for this, I think you should tag Sydney Wind, which was written at the most low point of my life.
So which song?
Died. Sydney Wind.
Sydney Wind. Where's that on? Which album?
On the Winter Sun album, I think.
Sydney Wind. Yep, got it. Yep.
And to me, it's one of the most poetic and evocative portraits of a city. What I had in mind when I wrote that was Tommy Leonetti's My City of Sydney. So remember, I'd met the XL Capris, and they had a hit with that. And at the time, I was thinking about writing a portrait song of Sydney, but it was also it's a song of mourning, like St. James Infirmary, the blues song. And it was about my mother's passing, and very young and very difficult. And then you have other songs later, like Amphetamine, which has Lewis Dillon on it, and there is Turn It Up Loud.
Yeah,
so much better loud, and you've got this rambling, wild piano. It's just sort of jamming along to a rock band talking about how crazy life is in the 7 different cities of Sydney at that time. And so they would be 2 key songs I reckon I'd play.
All right. I'm going to actually play those after we hang up in a moment. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you. Hopefully,
thank you for having me, Vincent.
That's all right. Hopefully we do hear from you again in the sense of some new music. That would be fantastic. And all the best with all the curating.
I have to thank you, Vincent. You've completely reinvented my career by contacting me that day. And do you remember the funny story that we nearly lost all of that music? Because the 2019 bushfires that swept through, burned our house and everything to the ground. And I'd run in 15 minutes beforehand to get the master recordings and everything that were in this huge box into the back of my car, and we drove off. They came within minutes.
That is fantastic. Now, I remember talking to you the very first time. I was in Sydney, visiting Sydney, and at Harbourside, and Mark from Ganga Jang had said, come down, we're doing a free show down at Harbourside. And in between meetings, I said, yeah, okay. So I'm in between there. So Ganga Jang are playing, and I'm talking to you on the phone. And I remember that very clearly. And that's where the whole process started from. It was many years ago now, but yes, it's been a pleasure working with you. All right.
But people are contacting me from all over the world. Did you know that?
No, that is I love hearing that. That is fantastic. Fantastic.
And they're saying, I wish I'd known about your band. I really like what you're doing. Are these new records? And I'm going, no, they're 30 plus years old.
Yeah.
And they're always stunned, by that. They think they're fairly new recordings.
Yeah.
And then there's that ridiculous American band who calls themselves that as well. So there's an American group who call themselves the Sea Monsters.
Absolutely. Actually, you're right, because it comes up here when you do a search. It comes up with, Sea Monsters.
And I begged CBS to get off their arse and sue them and get them to change their name, but they never did.
You can't do that. It just does. Anyway, that's never going to happen. But anyway,
that might have got me in another combi,
Yeah.
But anyway, that never happened.
All right,
Vincent, we better go. Thank you for your time, and I'm very honoured. Thank you.
And let's hope we hear from some new music from Billy Gruner.
I'm going to work on that.
Thanks, Billy. Talk soon.
Well, there you have it. Another Laneway Talks. If you enjoyed that, just search Laneway Talks for more great conversations.
G'day folks, Mark Allen here and
The Ox, David Schwartz.
and we've started a brand new podcast called
A couple of blokes, a couple of beers, and we just chew on the fat.
Couple of blokes, couple of beers with Ox and Marco.
I'm thinking about whitening my teeth just so when I smile.
There's a new episode every Wednesday.
Have you got a weight issue?
Of course I do. It's a stupid loaded question.
A couple of blokes, couple of beers with David Schwartz and Mark Allen.
I'm eating the kids' Maltese.
You're eating their Christmas present.
I am a piece of garbage.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.